The expression on my sister's face when she walked through those restored oak doors, that's the image I keep coming back to. She stopped mid-sentence, her mouth still open around whatever cutting remark she'd been about to make, and just stared. At the crown molding I'd had hand restored. At the original heart pine floors, refinished to a warm amber glow. At me, standing in the center of it all, in a dress that cost more than her monthly mortgage payment. I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back 8 months, because none of this makes sense without that Saturday morning in April when I found out I'd been cut for my own family's anniversary celebration. My parents were coming up on their 30th wedding anniversary. 30 years is a big deal in any family, but in ours, it felt almost mythological. My dad had proposed to my mom on the front steps of the Hargrove Inn, a landmark hotel in our hometown of Beaumont, Georgia. They'd held their reception there. Every 5 years, without fail, they renewed their vows in the same ballroom. It was the one tradition our family had that actually meant something. I had been at every single one of those ceremonies since I was old enough to remember. I live in Austin now. I've been here for 7 years, running a financial consulting firm I built from a single desk in my apartment. I won't pretend it was easy. There were years when I worked until 2 in the morning and woke up at 6 to do it again. There were years when I missed things, birthdays, Christmases, a cousin's graduation, because I was closing deals or onboarding clients or simply trying to keep the lights on. My family understood that, or I thought they did. My sister, she's 4 years older than me, has always had a complicated relationship with the fact that I left. She stayed in Beaumont. She married her high school boyfriend, had 2 kids young, and built a life that looks exactly like the one our mother had. I respect that. I never criticized it. But somewhere along the way, she started interpreting my ambition as a comment on her choices. I didn't see it clearly until much later. So, April. I was in the middle of a hectic week trying to finalize a merger analysis for a client in Dallas when I got a text from my cousin asking if I'd seen the family group chat. I hadn't checked it in a few days. I scrolled up and saw a photo my sister had posted, my parents at a dinner table laughing, surrounded by family members I recognized. The caption read, "Kicking off the 30th anniversary celebrations. So grateful for this family." I wasn't in that photo. I hadn't known about that dinner. I kept scrolling. There were more photos, a wine tasting, a Sunday brunch at my aunt's house, a weekend at a lake cabin 2 hours from Beaumont, planning posts, excitement posts, coordination posts spanning back nearly 3 weeks. My sister was the one organizing everything. And at no point, not once, had anyone texted me directly, called me, or included me in any of the planning. I called my mom. She sounded flustered when she answered, not surprised. "Honey, I assumed your sister had reached out to you." "She didn't." A pause. "Well, she said you mentioned you'd be too busy with work." I sat very still. "Mom, I never said that. I have never once said I was too busy for your anniversary." Another pause. Longer this time. "She said you texted her. Can you ask her to show you the text?" That conversation did not go the way I hoped. My sister, when confronted, produced what she claimed was a screenshot of a message from me saying I couldn't make the anniversary trip and not to bother with logistics on my end. I had never sent that message. I knew I hadn't. But try explaining that to a family that was already 3 weeks into celebrating without you. My mom wanted to keep the peace. My dad, who has always avoided conflict like it owes him money, said maybe there'd been a misunderstanding. My aunt suggested maybe I'd sent it by accident. The only person who looked me in the eye and said nothing was my sister. I booked a flight home for the following weekend and showed up at my parents' house unannounced. Not to cause a scene, I want to be clear about that. I went because I needed to look at my sister's face and understand what was actually happening. What I found was a family that had been fed a slow, steady stream of half-truths about me for what turned out to be years. I'm too career-obsessed. I think I'm better than everyone. I send money instead of showing up because I think money fixes everything, I once said, according to my sister, that Beaumont was a dead-end town, and I was glad to be out of it. I have never said those words in my life. I love Beaumont. I grew up climbing the oak trees behind the Baptist church on Crawford Street and eating boiled peanuts from the gas station on Route 12, and I would never, not once, call it a dead-end anything. But the damage was thorough. I could see it in the way my aunt chose her words carefully around me, and how my uncle made a joke about big city money that wasn't entirely a joke, and how my mom hugged me just a half-second shorter than she used to. My sister had been quietly dismantling my relationships with my own family for years, and I hadn't been there enough to notice. I drove back to the airport that Sunday evening feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not sadness exactly, something colder and more focused. I had spent 7 years building something real and meaningful, and in all that time I had trusted that my family was still mine to come back to. That trust had been used against me. I wasn't angry in the way that makes you want to yell. I was angry in the way that makes you very, very quiet. I started making calls the following Monday. Here's something most people don't know about Beaumont, Georgia. The Hargrove Inn has been sitting half-empty for the better part of a decade. The family that originally owned it, the actual Hargroves, sold it to a hospitality group out of Atlanta back in 2015, and that group made a series of poor decisions and eventually let the property deteriorate to the point where it was barely running. It had been quietly listed for sale for 14 months by the time I started looking into it. The price had already been reduced twice. I found out about it the way I find out about most things, through someone who knew the situation. A colleague of mine had done work in the Georgia hospitality sector and mentioned offhand that there were some interesting distressed properties in the region. I pulled the listing that night, and when I saw the address, I just sat there for a minute. It was the Hargrove Inn, my parents' hotel, the place where every significant anniversary of their marriage had been celebrated for 30 years. I called my attorney the next morning. I want to address something directly because it's the kind of thing people will question. Yes, I paid above the asking price, not 30% above. I'm a financial consultant, not someone who throws money around carelessly. I came in at roughly 11% over the final listed price, and I did that for 2 specific reasons. 1, I wanted a fast close with minimal negotiation because I did not want word getting out before I was ready. 2, the sellers had been sitting on a declining asset for over a year, and giving them a clean exit at a fair price above market was a reasonable use of leverage. I've structured enough deals to know when a premium is justified. I purchased the property through a holding company registered in Delaware, standard practice for commercial real estate acquisitions, and in this case it had the added benefit of keeping my name off any public-facing documentation. In a town like Beaumont, where my last name is known and my family has history, that mattered. I needed time before anyone started asking questions. I hired a project manager out of Savannah who had done historic restoration work on several antebellum properties along the Georgia coast. I flew down twice during the renovation to walk the property with her. The original ballroom had good bones, original molding, original plank floors under 2 layers of carpet and vinyl, original arched windows that just needed the paint stripped and the hardware replaced. The guest rooms needed full gut renovations, but we kept the architectural details wherever we could. During this entire period, I did not contact my sister. I did not reach out to my parents beyond the normal birthday calls and occasional check-ins. I did not tell anyone in my family that I was back in Georgia, sometimes for days at a time, overseeing a restoration project 20 minutes from the house I grew up in. I will admit there was one moment when I almost broke. I drove past my parents' house one evening on my way back to the hotel I was staying at. A different hotel, obviously. And I saw the lights on in the kitchen and my mom's silhouette through the window. She was probably doing dishes. She does dishes at that hour every night. She always has. I sat in the rental car in the dark for probably 10 minutes before I made myself drive away. I wasn't avoiding her because I didn't love her. I was giving myself time to build something that would speak louder than anything I could say. The renovation took 5 months. We opened the books to a soft launch in early October and had it fully operational by mid-November with a full-time general manager I'd recruited from a boutique hotel group in Charleston. The Hargrove Inn, and I kept the name because it belongs to Beaumont, not to me, was restored. Better than before, if I'm honest. The kind of place that shows up on travel blogs and anniversary getaway lists. My parents' 30th anniversary fell on November 22nd. I called my mom on November 15th, 1 week before. I told her I was coming home for the anniversary and that I had something I wanted to show the family. She was warm but cautious in the way she'd been since April, and I could hear her trying to figure out how to manage the situation around my sister. I told her not to worry about any of that. I told her I just wanted to see her and Dad, and I had a surprise. She asked if it was something nice. I told her it was something I'd been working on for a while. My sister called me the next day. I had expected this. Word travels fast when you're the one who's been controlling the narrative. She opened with something vague about hoping we could keep the peace for the anniversary, and then, when I didn't immediately agree to whatever terms she was quietly implying, she shifted to a version of the story where she'd been protecting the family from my bad attitude and erratic communication. I listened to all of it. I let her talk. When she finished, I said I was looking forward to seeing everyone on the 22nd. She didn't know what to do with that, so she said okay and hung up. I drove into Beaumont on the morning of the 22nd and went straight to the inn. We had set up a private dinner in the original ballroom for my parents, using the same floral arrangements my mom had used in her wedding photos, white gardenias and dusty miller, which she has mentioned approximately 100 times over the years as her favorite combination. The catering team had put together a menu that included several of my parents' favorite dishes. The GM had arranged for the exact table placement from old photographs I'd found in a box my mom kept in her closet and had quietly photographed on a previous visit home. The family, my aunt and uncle, 2 cousins, my dad's brother and his wife, my sister and her husband and their kids, was told by my mom that there was a dinner reservation at a new place and to dress nicely. They arrived at the Hargrove Inn at 6:30. My sister walked in first. She's always been the type to lead, to establish the terms of a room before others enter it. She pushed open the restored oak doors, stepped into the lobby, and stopped. I was standing near the front desk, which is positioned so that you see it immediately upon entering. I had chosen to wear a dress my mother had commented on the last time I'd visited because I wanted her to recognize it and feel, in some small way, that I had been thinking of her. My sister's expression cycled through several things very quickly. Confusion first. She didn't recognize the lobby. It had been so thoroughly restored. Then recognition when her eyes moved up to the original Hargrove crest above the entryway, which I'd had regilded. Then something harder and more complicated. "What is this?" she said. My mom stepped in behind her and stopped walking. She pressed both hands over her mouth. My dad came in last, and I watched him look around the lobby. The restored plank floors, the original fireplace with fresh flowers on the mantel, the framed photographs along the east wall that I'd had professionally printed from my parents' own wedding album, and I watched his face do the thing faces do when something hits them all at once and there's nowhere to put it. He looked at me. "You did this? For you and Mom?" I said. "Happy 30th. What followed was not a dramatic confrontation in the way you might imagine. It was actually quieter than that. My dad hugged me for a long time. My mom cried in the way she cries when she's happy and overwhelmed and doesn't want to make a scene but can't stop herself. My aunt grabbed my arm and asked me about 12 questions in a row. My sister stood slightly apart from all of this. Her husband touched her elbow at one point. Her kids ran off toward the ballroom where someone had set up a small photo display of family history that included old photographs of the inn. The conversation about what had actually happened, the fake screenshot, the dinners I hadn't been told about, the years of quiet revision, didn't happen that night. It happened the following afternoon at my parents' kitchen table with my mom and dad and my sister and me. I had kept records. Not because I'm naturally litigious, but because 7 years of running a business teaches you to document things. I had phone records showing no outgoing text to my sister on the date of the supposed message. I had emails. I had the metadata from my own phone. My sister didn't deny it, exactly. She said she'd been trying to protect the family from what she saw as my absence, that she'd been the one holding things together while I was building my career, that money wasn't the same as being present. Some of what she said was not entirely wrong, and I told her that I had missed things. I had sometimes chosen work when I should have chosen family. That was real and I owned it, but fabricating a message was not a response to my absence. It was a betrayal. And she knew that. I could see it in how she couldn't quite hold my gaze. My parents sat with us through all of it. My mom cried again, this time differently. My dad said almost nothing for most of it, and then at the end said to my sister very quietly that he needed her to understand that what she'd done had hurt me and that it had to stop. Coming from my dad, who avoids conflict like a religion, that was significant. My sister nodded. She didn't apologize fully. Not that day, but she nodded and I could see that something had shifted. The Hargrove Inn hosted my parents' anniversary dinner that evening. 30 years celebrated in the same ballroom where it had all begun, with the original floors and the restored windows and the gardenias my mother had carried 30 years ago. In the spring, I established a small scholarship fund through the Beaumont school district, the kind of thing I'd been thinking about for years without knowing quite what form it should take. It supports first-generation college students, which felt right, given that I was one. The inn runs without me on a daily basis. That's what a good GM is for. But I'm there more than I expected to be. Beaumont is smaller than Austin, quieter, more familiar in ways I'd forgotten I missed. I've started flying back more often, not because I owe it to anyone, but because I want to. My sister and I talk now. It's still careful, the way things are when the ground underneath has shifted and neither of you quite trusts it yet. But we talk. She came to the inn last month with her kids and let them run around the ballroom, and she stood next to me at the window looking out at the back garden and said, quietly, that it was beautiful. I told her I knew.